Hi everyone, it is Kendall here, and we have week 7 of our Brackman sampler today. I'm sorry that I can't be with you in a live chat today, and I did just schedule this to go live at the normal 7:15, but without the premiere as I'm currently away at my sister's. Well, not currently, I'm still sitting in my studio, but by the time, yeah, you get it. Alrighty, so without much further ado, come with me and I'll show you how to do it. Week number 7, let's spin the wheel. Block number 1699. Brackman ID 1699 gives us the Flying Shuttles block. This again is a Nancy Cabot design, which we have had quite a few from her now. So the same thing again. This was first appeared in a syndicated column written by Loretta Rising for the Chicago Tribune in the 1930s. The Cabot column began in 1932 and continued through the decade. Patterns were reprinted in the 1960s and 70s, but are currently out of print again. As I discussed in block number 5, I believe it was, Wilma Smith was a lady who was writing as Nancy, and she indexed a lot of Cabot patterns, but many of the patterns that were attributed to Cabot from this indexing may not have actually been from that source. We begin where we do with every one of my videos, and that is with all of our pieces cut out, as you can see on the table in front of me here, following the rotary cutting directions on the supplied cutting sheet. This is a block with many parts, but it is as simple to put together as many of our others, as it is simply some half square triangles, 3 square and a square blocks, and some solid squares. And that's about it. We need to make a few 4 patches. Anyway, let's get on with it. So we're going to start where we normally always do as well, which is with our half square triangles. And for that, we need pieces A and D. We're going to take a pencil or your marking tool of choice and draw a diagonal line on the back of all of our A squares. We'll line these up with those D squares, right sides together, take those to the machine, stitch 1/4 inch on each side of our drawn line. Once we've done our stitching, I like to give them a press first to settle the stitches down into the fabric before cutting them in half along our drawn line, and then we will press them all to the darker of the 2 fabrics. As discussed in a previous video, when I am trimming down these smaller half square triangles, I do bring in my little makeshift block lock ruler, which I've just applied 3 layers of painter's tape along that diagonal to create a ledge that butts up against that seam allowance, as you can see here, to just make it easier to trim down these smaller units. So we'll line our makeshift edge up along that seam allowance, make sure we have enough fabric outside our trim down measurement of 2.5 inches on all 4 sides, including under the ruler, and trim away those first 2 sides. We can then spin everything around all in one foul swoop, slide our makeshift block lock down, back to those 2.5 inch measurements now, and slice off those final 2 sides. I'll get all 12 of these done, and I'll be back with you. We'll now move on to making our square on point or square in square or economy block, when we need 3 of those for these blocks, and the final size is 4.5 inches. I'm choosing throughout the video to do this by putting a sew and flip on all 4 corners of these blocks, and for that, as you would be aware, I do use my folded corner clipper tool. It is my preferred method for doing the sew and flips, as I really don't need to think about it, but I have provided foundation paper piecing for you again this week for just these square in a square blocks. You don't always need to line this folded corner clipper up perfectly on all your measurements. I sometimes just do as you see me doing here and find the diagonal from corner to corner by just lining up that bottom corner. And I just feel sometimes that's easier. I don't have to think about it. I just plonk the ruler down, see where the line is, and I slice till my heart's content. So I'll keep going, and I'm going to have to do 12 sew and flips in total. That's all 4 corners of 3 of our C-squares. You will see there that I get the sew and flips on the opposing sides done all at the same time, and that's just so that I can chain piece it through and save some time. In all instances for these sew and flips, we'll press out towards our background fabric, or our B square in this instance. We can set those units aside now and move on to creating our other 4 patch units, which make up the rest of the blocks for this. And in total, we need to make 6 of these. So what you see me doing here is with our E squares, making a stack of 6. We actually need to do 2 stacks of 6. And then separate out our small half square triangles there also into 2 stacks of 6. Please pay careful attention to the layout block on the cutting requirements document, as you'll notice that throughout here I do actually get my half square triangles in the wrong orientation. So we'll set this out in our 4 patch fashion. We'll start by sewing all of our vertical seams. We'll press all of those towards that solid red square in my instance, or the E square depending on what fabric you're using, and then we'll sew our final horizontal seams all the way along, making sure that our half square triangles are in the correct orientation, because there is a specific way they need to sit in the block. While I'm going through this part after I've pressed, I find a few that are sewn in the wrong orientation, and it's not that they're actually sewn in the wrong orientation. I've just, in between taking them from the machine and sewing them and pressing them, I got them all mixed around. So I go through and I make sure that everything's okay, and I deleted all of that footage, and everything was okay in the end, but I did already unpick a couple and re-sew them, which was just even not necessary. I just got them all out of order. So do take care when doing these units. And with that vertical seams now done, you saw there, I've taken them to the machine and I've done all of our horizontal seams. Now, whenever I do have some half square triangles coming together in the center of a block, such as this one, I do like to spin those seams just to flatten that out and make it as flat as possible for the final quilt. So we just take our little friend Jack and we unpick those few stitches that are on the outside of the horizontal seam allowance we've just sewn on both sides. That allows us to open up that seam, and we look at which way the seams were already pressed on when we did the vertical ones, and that can either be clockwise or counterclockwise. So once I open that up here, we've got them going in a clockwise direction, so we move those new seam allowances in those same directions, and that opens up that little spot in the center there and distributes all of that fabric evenly. We then take this and press that into place, and I'll do that for all 6 of these. With those units now made, we do have all of the parts that we need to make up our final 9 patch. And again, pay careful attention to our layout diagram that's on the cutting requirements sheet to make sure that we have our half square triangles and these 4 patch units oriented in the right direction. The upper left and the bottom right corner, the half square triangles point away from the block, and along the center there they point in towards the middle. Once we've got this laid out and we're happy that it is correct, 9 patch construction rules apply. We're going to start by sewing all of our vertical seams and then our horizontal seams. With the first 3 vertical seams done, I just finger press these roughly into place before attaching that final column of blocks. So for the top and the bottom row, we'll press in towards the 4 patch, and on the middle row, we'll press out towards those 4 patch units. This will allow for all of our seam allowances to nest nicely when we come to our horizontal seams. Now that we have the second vertical seam done, it is time to get the iron and press these into place properly. Just making sure that again, on the top and the bottom row, we're pressing in towards that middle block, and on the middle row, we're pressing out towards the outside of the block. We'll then pin this together, matching up everything that we can. Notice that it nests nicely, and do our horizontal seams. Once I've done the horizontal seams, I can't remember right now how I pressed, so let's have a look at that when we get there. So it looks like I just pressed up away from the center row in both instances, and that completes the block for that construction style. If you are using the Marty Michelle templates, here is my grey version of this block, and for this block you will need templates B10, B12 and B13. I haven't got a layout of those because I think it will be self-explanatory once you have those cut and ready to go, but I wanted to show you my grey version for this block. If you are using the AccuQuilt, once again you will need to have the 8-inch mix and match cube to get the right sized pieces. I only have the 6-inch and 9-inch blocks, so I'm using the 6-inch cube for these. For the AccuQuilt you will need shapes 2, 5 and 6, and that is included in the cutting diagrams as well. And I'm just going to go and briefly show you how we go about cutting the pieces using our AccuQuilt.
A few moments later.
No need to watch me sewing that block up, but here is my 9-inch version using my 6-inch cube in the green and gold. And once again, when I am using AccuQuilt, I do press my seams open. Here is what this block would look like in a repeat, and it doesn't actually create much interest there, but you could make it really scrappy. The second version I'm showing here is the same sort of idea, but with every other block rotated around, and that does give you points of interest and a secondary pattern. You could also, with the blocks being all turned around, add sashing and cornerstones, and that is what this third example is and what it would look like. Well, thanks for joining me again this week, folks, and I can tell you that this should be the last of the multicolour blocks, and we will return to just one colour again for the remainder, as I have already checked ahead and actually made all the videos, and yeah. So for those of you that are working with one colour only, this will be the last one that you'll have to really do a rethink on how you're putting your blocks together. If you haven't done so already, I'd love for you to like the video, share it with a friend, subscribe if you haven't already done so, but most importantly, tickle that little bell icon to be notified of all my future releases, and you won't miss a thing. I'll see you all again real soon. Bye for now.